Now there are, this same Oruka, I identified originally 4 main trends in African philosophy. But later he added 2 more trends, and I want to share them very quickly and what they are about. The first one is ethnophilosophy. We've already talked about it, have we not? Temples and BT, you go to the village, you interview the old people, and you come up with a picture, oh, this community believes this about the universe, this about ethics. The problem is, then you are saying Africans all believe the same thing, but when you come to Western philosophy, each philosopher is an individual. Interesting. And some of us struggle with that. Then you have professional philosophy. That is practiced by people like me, people who have studied philosophy Western style and have got their degrees from Western or Western type institutions. Western meaning in Europe or America, Western type meaning a university like the University of Nairobi, where I got my PhD 4 years ago. And these people have written philosophical works, but within an African context. So, to the question, what is African philosophy? One answer, ethnophilosophy. Second answer, professional philosophy. Third answer, sage philosophy. This was advocated by H. Odera Oruka, my compatriot, the one we talked about, practical philosophy. And he said he didn't like ethnophilosophy, but he still wanted a truly African philosophy with a real African flavor. And so although he had his degrees from the West, his bachelor's from, what is this country? It has gone from where Uppsala is. Where is Uppsala? Yeah. It's one of the Nordic countries. It has just flown out of the mind. That's where he went for his bachelor's. Then he came to America for his master's. And I think he went back to the Scandinavian countries for his PhD. And he came to Kenya. And he found this debate about African philosophy, and people are bashing ethnophilosophy, and he joins in the bashing. But the ethnophilosophers answer, but you are no better, you are just mouthing the philosophy of the West. You have those degrees from the West, and you are appendages of Western philosophy. And so he says, I will go to the village, but unlike the ethnophilosophers, I won't come here and tell you the ontology of the Luo or the cosmology of the Kikuyu, but I will come back and show you evidence that in our villages, there are people who never went to Western schools, but who are critical thinkers. And we will record what they say. We will write it down. We will translate it. We will put it in the libraries. And that is African philosophy. So that is what he did, and that's the other trend in sage philosophy. Then you have nationalist ideological philosophy. These are the writings of people like Nyerere, Nkrumah, Kenyatta, Kaunda, who are writing about how to liberate Africa from colonialism. Not just in terms of getting flags, but in terms of ensuring we are really free from the West. These are not necessarily trained philosophers, but Oruka thought that is one more trend in African philosophy. Then we have hermeneutical school. They borrow from existentialism in the West, from phenomenology in the West, and try to use those conceptual tools to reflect on the African reality. Then we have artistic philosophy. the philosophical thoughts of African creative writers, novelists, poets, playwrights, and we are trying to distill the philosophical ideas that drive them to write what they write. And Oruka finally concluded, those two are African philosophers. I'm coming towards the end and I'm pretty pleased with myself. I'm actually shocked that and one of the biggest debates, most vigorous debates in African philosophy is this. Is African philosophy particular to specific cultures? Or is it universal? And the particularists are saying, African philosophy is unique to Africa. Don't judge it using Western parameters. But the universalists are saying, no way. Why don't we have African physics? African biology? Why don't we have African mathematics? Mathematics is mathematics anywhere on Earth. So is physics, so is biology, so is chemistry. So why should it be different with philosophy if it's truly an academic, if it's truly a discipline? What is unique, they say, about African philosophy is that it will deal with issues that touch the Africans. But its methodology must meet the threshold of philosophy anywhere in the world. That is the debate. But I want to end with the thoughts of an American thinker who also studies African philosophy. By the way, we talk a lot about African and Africanist scholars. An African scholar is like somebody like me. An Africanist scholar will be a European or an American who is interested in African philosophy and writes and publishes on it. He or she is not an African, but he is an Africanist. And one of them is called Jennifer Lisa Vest. She works here in the US, she's a US citizen. And the thrust of what she says is that for you to ask whether there is philosophy in Africa, you are asking a perverse question. Basically what you are asking is, are Africans human beings? That's what you're asking. Because the distinguishing feature of a human being is that he or she has the ability to reason. And philosophy is reasoning refined. And you are asking whether the African can reason. You might as well be honest enough to ask whether the African is a human being. That's what she thinks you're asking. And you have her statement there. She goes on and says that you must not engage in academic dialogues that are guided by that kind of outlook. And so she goes on to suggest that we must get rid of that discussion. Is there a philosophy in Africa? So that we can get on with the business of philosophizing in Africa. And I have tried to follow her advice. My area of specialization is political philosophy. And I am doing my political philosophy within the African context. I'm very busy bashing liberal democracy, as those of you who were at my talk yesterday learned. And I'm very busy bashing it, not for America, but for Africa. Because Africans are communalistic, and yet liberal democracy is based on individualism. And so I am arguing that democracy has not failed in Africa. What has failed in Africa is liberal democracy. And therefore, some of us are saying, we don't want to keep discussing whether there was African philosophy or not. We don't even want to be busy answering the question, which of the trends is the correct one. We want to get on with the business of philosophizing, which is what everybody has to do. Without an adequate definition of philosophy, you go on and teach philosophy or attend philosophy classes, because the definition of philosophy is controversial. And so I conclude by saying, by its very nature, philosophy is a restless discipline. And this attribute is clearly seen on the debates, in the debates on the nature of African philosophy. Thank you very much.